Siamo un paese che guarda al passato perché non sa cos'è il futuro.
The questions for you, it would be in general, like if you are in favor of the inheritance tax or in general, like, of maybe any other sort of wealth tax, if there would be some sort of exemption that you would introduce in this kind of inheritance tax, and in general, this millionaire thing, if, the inheritance tax makes millionaires fly, and if in general is a bad thing or a good thing.
Broadly speaking, I tend not to be a fan of annual wealth taxes. And inheritance taxation, again, kind of on a very, very broad level, I tend to think about it as, there are good arguments for it, and they are primarily about equality of opportunities or kind of redistributional aspects of all of this. In broad terms, like, should we have inheritance taxation? Yeah, I think there is a case for having inheritance taxation. There are a lot of problems that you sort of touched on, both of you touched on, in terms of design of these taxes, and some that you haven't touched on. So one is, okay, so once we agree that it's primarily redistributional, you can kind of make sense of the graph that you had. Like, there is variation across countries, but these are not taxes that collect a lot of revenue in general. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are not useful, because if they are very, very, very redistributional and this is really what we want to do, they don't have to collect an enormous amount of revenue to have the bite when they are primarily imposed on very, very rich people. So, but as a source of revenue, inheritance taxes and more generally wealth taxes, they are not a big thing anywhere. That's not where the revenue lies. So you have to think about sort of these other considerations. Another interesting thing, again, about these international comparisons is that like, if you start thinking about like which countries are where, it's actually all over the place. So countries that don't have inheritance taxation are, for example, Sweden and Norway. I mean, countries that are very, very, have very redistributive policies that collect a lot of revenue. So not necessarily the first ones that at least would come to my mind. Is this type of taxation absolutely necessary to have equitable system? Here are examples where they don't rely on those. They rely on other instruments, but not on inheritance taxation. Then I guess a big part of my skepticism about wealth taxes in particular, but also to some extent about inheritance taxes, is this issue of exemptions that you have raised. It's kind of typical that real estate and businesses are the primary sources of wealth, or primary components of wealth. And it is true that in some countries like the US, there is big public markets and equity markets, and people own stocks and own a lot of wealth in the publicly traded companies. But many countries are sort of like Italy or closer to Italy, where you have a lot of smaller businesses or closely held businesses. Now, if you look how these taxes tend to be designed in many countries, they do give a lot of exemptions to these two categories, to owner-occupied housing, or not just owner-occupied housing. It also depends, because there are these issues of valuation that effectively matter even for commercial real estate. And then they give exemptions to businesses, closely held businesses. And that, to me, like, just looking at this, it makes zero sense. I mean, if the point of these taxes is some equity-related redistributional aspects, And what you have is, toward the top of the distribution, primary source of wealth, in real estate, and especially in closely held businesses. Then you should be taxing closely held businesses. If you are not doing that, then you are not doing redistribution, and you are introducing distortions, because you are inducing people to keep money in businesses, not necessarily in a productive way. There are a lot of ways in which you can retain earnings within a business and invest them in ways that are not necessarily particularly productive, like depending on the system, real estate, or portfolio investments, or some more esoteric things that are not necessarily productive business investments. So creating those exemptions just makes no sense. At the same time, can you effectively deal with valuation of these businesses and assess the value of them in kind of a reasonable way? That's a very hard problem, and all of the countries struggle with it. It's a hard problem because by their nature, because they are closely held, they are not. You don't have a ready valuation for it. So what do some countries do? Say you rely on a book value, but that's like we are deceiving ourselves, because that's understating heavily market value. So you are effectively having low taxation. Then you often have, you naturally have political pressures here. So this argument about liquidity, about the tax, this is a tax on orphans, and blah blah blah. All of those things, these are very, very potent arguments, and they sort of affect, it stops transmission of ownership within a firm. It kills family businesses. These types of things. These arguments come up all the time, and they put a lot of pressure on keeping taxation of businesses in this context low. So to me, this is the Achilles heel of wealth and inheritance taxation. The extra component that I would add to it that didn't come up is, if I understand correctly, Italy has a system that's sort of similar to what many other European countries have, which is the rate of taxation varies depending on the extent of relationship. It's an inheritance tax, and taxes on on inheritance to children are going to be different than farther out. So this thing, I find it fascinating, and the reason I find it fascinating is that so the U.S. system is a state tax system, meaning what's taxed is the value of total estate, everything that the person owns at death, and it doesn't matter. The spouse is an exception to it, but otherwise it doesn't matter who it goes to. So you are taxing overall estate. You're not giving preference to close family or things like this. You're not doing things like this. So if you think about what is this tax trying to accomplish? If it's trying to reduce intergenerational transmission of wealth and concentration, of wealth that sort of goes from one generation to another, that sort of European-like design of this tax just makes no sense. Why are you giving preferences to children? The point of this tax is actually to do the opposite. There's this funny tension. European countries, high taxation overall, but this tax is sort of designed in a way that sort of promotes retention of wealth within families. U.S. system, let's say broadly, lower taxes, but the estate tax that's high at the top of the distribution, and that actually tries to create with all its imperfections, some semblance of equality of opportunities, at least at the very top. So, just wanted to raise that as sort of yet another aspect of the design.
Proviamo a dire, ma anche a fare, l'ovvio.